Returning to Phoenix felt like stepping into a remake of a movie they had already starred in. But this time, they weren't waitresses and tourists. They were investigators. Mel's diner was still there, buzzing with the same heat and static. Mel greeted them with a hug that smelled of onions and relief. "I knew you'd come back," Mel grumbled. "The radio's been acting up again. Static so loud you could hear it in Tucson." "The Orpheum." "Mel," Vera said. "What do you know about the basement?" Mel's eyes widened. "The Orpheum? That place is haunted. Sugar. They closed the basement in '62 after a projectionist went missing. Said the walls were eating the film. They went to the theater that night, a grand, crumbling palace of Art Deco dreams. The basement was a labyrinth of rusted pipes and discarded props. In the very back, behind a velvet curtain that had turned to dust, they found a small, iron door. Vera used the Silver Phoenix, the third key on the lock. It fit perfectly. Inside was a small, climate-controlled room. In the center sat a single, silver pedestal holding a thick, bound manuscript. The title page read, "The New Girl in Town," a screenplay by Turkey Morgan. Vera opened the script. The first scene was set in a small diner in Phoenix. The protagonist was a girl named Vera. "It's about me," she whispered. "Turkey Morgan wrote my life before I was born." But as she reached the middle of the script, she found a redacted page. Behind it was a photograph of a woman who looked exactly like Vera, only she was wearing a nurse's uniform from the war. "That's my mother," Vera said, tears streaming down her face. "Turkey Morgan didn't write a script. He wrote a map of our family's survival." Chapter 41, The Final Reel in the Desert. The climax of the mystery didn't happen in a vault or a ballroom. It happened on the edge of the Apache Trail, overlooking the valley as the sun set in a blaze of orange and purple. They were met there by a man they thought they would never see again, Marcus Sterling. He had escaped custody and looked like a man who had spent 3 years in the wilderness. "The script, Vera," Sterling demanded, holding a flare gun. "Give me the script. It's the only thing that proves the Vane family actually owned the land the diner is on. Without it, the state seizes everything. The diner, the archives, everything." In the 1948 film Key Largo, Vera said, stepping forward with the manuscript, "Humphrey Bogart says that he's the one who's going to do the talking. And here's the talk, Marcus. This script isn't a legal document. It's a love letter. Turkey Morgan didn't love the gold. He loved the girl. My mother." "I don't care about love," Sterling screamed. "That's your mistake," Julian said, appearing from the shadows behind Sterling. "In this movie, the villain always underestimates the strength of the ensemble." Dino and a team of local deputies emerged from the brush surrounding Sterling. The flare gun was dropped, and the last remnant of the syndicate was finally silenced. Vera looked at the script in her hands. She realized that Turkey Morgan, her real father, had spent his life in the shadows to make sure she could live in the light. He had used the trivia, the movie quizzes, and the radio static to guide her home. Chapter 42. The credits roll. A month later, Marylebone was bathed in the soft light of a London spring. Vera's greasy spoon had a new addition to the menu, the Orpheum Special. Alice was rehearsing for her first West End leading role, a musical adaptation of The New Girl in Town. Belle was writing her memoirs, which Julian had promised to publish, and Mel had finally retired, moving to London to work as the diner's official head of grumbling. Vera and Julian were sitting in the back room, watching a restored version of a silent film. The radio in the corner was playing softly. "Music's hot. Don't be a fool. Keep your dial. Set it cool. KOOL. So," Julian said, kissing her hand, "is this the end of the movie?" Vera leaned against him, her heart full. "In the 1942 film now, Voyager," she whispered. "Bette Davis says, 'Oh, Jerry, don't let's ask for the moon. We have the stars.' And Julian, I think our stars are just beginning to align." The radio static cleared for one final second, and a voice, a deep, gravelly voice that sounded like it came from 1937, whispered through the speaker. "Good job, Turkey. You found the heart." Vera smiled and turned up the volume. The song was clear, The neighborhood was home. And for the first time in her life, Vera Louise Gorman knew that the best trivia of all was that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Chapter 43. The Shadow of the Remake. 5 years after the dust had settled in Phoenix, the world was a different place. The Phoenix Vault movie had become a global phenomenon, and Vera's Greasy Spoon was now a place of pilgrimage for film buffs and history nerds alike. But with fame came a new kind of parasite, the remake. A massive conglomerate, Vanguard Vision, had purchased the rights to the story from the minor studio that originally produced it. Their goal wasn't to preserve history, it was to optimize it. Vera was in the kitchen, experimenting with a recipe for Turkey Morgan's redacted ribs, when a man in a neon blue suit walked into the diner. He didn't look like he belonged in Marylebone or anywhere with a soul. "Miss Gorman, excuse me, Mrs. Vane," the man said, flashing a smile that was too white to be real. "I'm Sterling Jr. Yes, that's Sterling. But don't worry, I'm the good one. I'm here to discuss the reboot." Vera wiped her hands on her apron, her eyes narrowing. In the 1950 film All About Eve, Bette Davis says, "Fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy night." "I assume you're the bump, Mr. Sterling. Please, call me Leo," he said, taking a seat at the counter without asking. "We want to do a 10-part limited series. Gritty, high budget. We're thinking of changing Turkey Morgan's character, make him more of a traditional villain. A man who stole the archives for greed, not for the girl. It plays better to modern audiences." Vera felt a cold spark of rage. They wanted to rewrite her father again. They wanted to turn the heart back into a vault. "The truth isn't a commodity you can wear brand, Leo," Vera said, her voice low and steady. "Everything is a commodity, Vera," Leo replied, sliding a check across the formica. The amount of zeros was enough to buy 10 more diners. "Think about what this could do for your Phoenix Foundation. You could save every inner-city kid in London." Vera looked at the check, then at the radio on the shelf. The static was gone, but the ghost of the song remained. She knew that in the movies, when the devil offers you a deal, the fine print is usually written in the blood of your past. Chapter 44. The Static in the Machine. That night, the radio at the diner started acting up. It wasn't the usual white noise. It was a rhythmic pulse, like a heartbeat made of data. Julian, who had become something of an expert in digital security after the Paris affair, spent hours trying to trace the signal. "It's not a broadcast, Vera," Julian said, his brow furrowed as he stared at a laptop screen. "It's a direct transmission. Someone is using the 94 cool frequency to send a localized burst, and it's coming from inside Marylebone." Vera leaned over his shoulder. "In the 1968 film 2001, A Space Odyssey, Hal says, 'I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.'" "Is the radio talking back to us, Julian?" "It's more like a homing beacon," Julian replied. "Look at the wave pattern. It's an SOS, but not for help. It's for a meeting." The signal led them to the basement of the Marylebone Cinema, the room where they had watched the director's cut years ago. Sitting in the middle of the room was an old, heavy trunk that Vera hadn't noticed before. Vera used her silver Phoenix key on the lock. Inside was a high-tech transmitter and a single, unredacted page from the original New Girl in Town script. But this page wasn't written by Turkey Morgan. It was a letter from her mother. "Turkey, if you are reading this, then the shadow cabinet has failed. They think the archives are the prize. They don't know that the real heart is the machine, the one you built to record the frequencies of the desert, the one that can hear the truth before it's spoken." Vera's breath caught. The heart wasn't a script or a coin. It was a device. A piece of technology Turkey Morgan had developed during the war, a way to intercept and decode messages that were thought to be unhackable. And Vanguard Vision didn't want a reboot. They wanted the machine to control the world's information. Chapter 45. The Archivist's Revenge. The man who called himself Leo Sterling wasn't a producer. He was the son of Elias Thorne, the man who had died in prison. He had spent years laundering his identity, waiting for the fame of the Phoenix Vault to smoke out the last of Turkey Morgan's inventions. Vera and Julian were ambushed as they left the basement. Leo and a team of professional extractors were waiting for them in the alleyway. In the 1944 film Double Indemnity, Leo said, his neon blue suit glowing in the London rain, Fred MacMurray says that he did it for money and for a woman. I'm doing it for a legacy. Give me the machine, Vera. We don't have it, Julian spat, shielding Vera. You have the frequency, Leo countered, holding up a digital scanner. The SOS you heard? That was the machine waking up. It's buried somewhere in this city, and only the girl with the song can trigger the final sequence.